Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's great to be with you. Appreciate the welcome, and it's always good to come here. And you know, part of the great thing about being in Glasgow is just how close the two cities are. And so, like, there's just so much connection between these two cities. So, well, I feel like I've been in Glasgow. I feel like I've also got to know you guys as well, and those who are at Hogmanay, you know, had that shared memory as well. So, there's a lot to be thankful for. You know, Dre's communion. Yeah, even on that, you know, there's a good chance that we'll be able to stay, you know, beyond my time. That's yeah, you know, Chris has a flat that, like, he's prepared to let myself and a friend from London, Rahul Nanjandan, is going to plan to come up, and we're going to probably move in together. That's the plan, you know, in August. So yeah, it's looking like we're going to be able to stay. Well, I will, and I'm bringing reinforcements as well. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but you know, we're staying anyway. So hopefully that will go well. But yeah, I mean, like Dre said, my name is Nick. Yeah, originally from London. Yeah, originally from the London church. I moved up here August last year to do 1 Year Challenge, as Dre and Haley are doing, and I'm sure you guys appreciate them. And it's great to have moved up here. You know, 6 years ago, I never imagined being in Glasgow, doing a 1 Year Challenge. And for those of you who don't know, that just basically means you're giving your time to church, serving on campus in a variety of ways voluntarily, and it's been a really great experience. And so I've come from the mighty city of from London to the mighty city of Glasgow, and it's funny, the contrast is so different. The traits are so different. But one of the great things is, you know, just having things like this within 45 minutes. This is Ben Ann, if you guys know Ben Ann, up in the Trossachs, and that was about two weeks ago. That's actually Lorna there. Like standing, we're doing all kinds of poses, like, you know, get down and pray. We're like put a motivational quote up there, and you know, you could use that easily. It's just incredible. Really do love it. You know, and as an Englishman as well, this week's been a bit painful, but you know, I was envisioning a time last week where I could be standing here doing the lesson and then a few hours going to watch England in the World Cup final. That would have been amazing, incredible. But it didn't happen. You know, it's hard to predict how England will play. If you ever follow them, it's like it could go any way possible. Well, not really. They normally go down, but this time's been different. But one of the things that's been great about that is just seeing the way things have come. I think the World Cup brings people together, brings different nations together. You know, you watch different teams, the way they play. You see, like, there's even like Japanese or Senegalese cleaning up the stadium after they're done. Like, just their approach to the game is so interesting. And even those who aren't avid fans come in and they're like rooting for their country, or they get behind another country. And we'll see what happens later on. I don't know if you guys have any vested interest in today's game. I've already seen a few French shirts out in Edinburgh this morning, actually, on my way over. So clearly got some Frenchmen here. Yeah, but here's my lesson, and I've got a little lesson that we're actually bringing across that I did in Glasgow about 5-6 weeks ago from the book of Revelation, which you may not have expected, but that's where we're going to be. And I don't know if you guys you've probably read Revelation, or you've come across the book at some point, and it can often feel quite like a challenging and scary book to get into. Go ahead and you can start turning towards Revelation. But no, personally, it's been a really eye-opening experience to read and to hear the lessons, a useful time, just hearing about the different elements of this really incredible book we have in the Bible. You know, it's a book rich with history, imagery, all kinds of spiritual direction for the church, all locked within kind of a very unique context in which it was given, but one that is still so useful to us today as Christians. So yeah, turn over to Revelation 2. So we're going to read two of the churches that Jesus actually speaks to, but a little bit of a bit of the introduction. I've got a different PowerPoint to the one that actually that's what I had, but I sent Ben a different one. But I'm going to give you some basic facts around Revelation. It was written by the Apostle John, they believe, because they've been able to use some of the writings in the book and compared it to the book of John, and they think that he was probably the one who wrote the book. Yeah, in Revelation 1:9, we're told that actually a picture here. Revelation 1:9, we're told that John is actually on the island of Patmos, which is off of modern-day Turkey, and he's receiving these revelations, and he's speaking to the churches. As you can see, the 7 churches that are in modern-day Turkey, what it was called then the Asian province. It was under the Roman Empire, which is really interesting. So it gives you a bit of context. In Revelation 1:3, It also tells us that, you know, these revelations that are about to be given are within a unique context of warning the Christians about what is to come, about how the church is spreading, the opposition, some of the difficulties and challenges they're going to face, but how to be, just to persevere, keep going, keep faithful. Jesus may have gone, but there's still a great hope for you guys. You know, just keep persevering. And so we're going to go and read two scriptures given by, you know, Jesus' words to two churches. We're going to read the churches of Philadelphia and Smyrna, and they're two really encouraging passages actually. So let's go and read. Let's go to Revelation 2. And the idea of having kind of the seven is kind of seven, you know, in the Bible, as with much of Revelation, has a unique imagery, context, there's symbolism. Seven is kind of completeness. God made the world in 7 days and so on. And there's that idea of completeness in doing seven. But I mean, it doesn't just end with these churches. It's for all the church at this time and to come. So yeah, that's why the seven are still there, and it's still relevant to us. The title of the lesson, as it says up there, is, you know, to the church in Smyrna and Philadelphia, Conquering Christianity. You could even shorten that to just Conquering Christianity, and I'll explain a bit more why in a bit. You know, throughout the letters as well, there's a lot of references to this conquering, overcoming, victorious. These words are very, very common if you go and read Revelation, particularly these chapters. And they're really interesting. You know, when you think of the Roman world, the Roman Empire, in which this, you know, this time occurred, what was the Roman Empire known for? Conquering, going out, you know, conquering other nations, keep expanding the borders. And so the use of even the word conquering, it must, you know, it is very interesting, and we'll learn more about why Jesus uses that and what he means by it. So let's go ahead and read Revelation 2, which is to the church in Smyrna. To the angel of the church in Smyrna write, "These are the words of him who is the first and the last, who died and came to life again. I know your afflictions and your poverty, yet you are rich. I know about the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not be afraid of what you are about to suffer. I tell you, the devil will put some of you in prison to test you, and you will suffer persecution for 10 days. Be faithful even to the point of death, and I will give you your life as a victor's crown. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who is victorious will not be hurt at all by the second death." Let's go and read to Philadelphia in chapter 3. To the church in Philadelphia write, "These are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the keys of David. What he opens no one can shut, and what he shuts no one can open. I know your deeds. See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know you have a little strength, yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. I will make those who are a synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews though they are not, but are liars, I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. Since you have kept my command to endure patiently, I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. I'm coming soon. Hold on to what you have, so that no one will take your crown. The one who is victorious, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will they leave it. I will write on them the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God. And I will also write on them my new name. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches." Amen. This is, you know, just a really incredible couple of passages here. You know, this is Jesus speaking. You know, if you have it in your Bible, you see it's the red. You know, you see Jesus is speaking to the churches. This is what John is writing down, and obviously a letter to give to those churches in particular. If you read the other two, well, Revelation 2 and 3, you actually read the other accounts of the other churches as well. But the reason why I put these two together is because they just represent such an encouraging picture, actually, of the church at this time. You know, Christians in this day. It's a very impressive, like, you know, Jesus obviously thought so highly of these churches, of these people, to write such words about them. You know, for their faith, their endurance, their perseverance, their conviction. It must have just felt so good to even hear Jesus say this about your church. I mean, imagine Jesus saying that, you know, giving you these letters, and you can just feel so inspired. Unfortunately, you know, with some of the other churches, you know, you can see there's different struggles going on in the church. There's sin that's kind of creeping in from the outside. They're actually called to stop being lukewarm. Some of them have turned lukewarm in their faith, which means kind of to be neither here nor there in their faith. And also he challenges others just to remember what they learned at first, just to go back to their old ways. So there's all kinds of things going on, all kinds of situations to deal with. But when it comes to Smyrna and Philadelphia, Jesus has kind of only but praise, only commendation for their faith.
Amen.
In the trials. There's just it's just all out praise, which is amazing. Personally, I love to receive praise and admiration. Maybe you can relate to that. It feels good, doesn't it? When you can feel vindicated, like you've done something and someone sees it. Growing up in a household with siblings, you also appreciate when you get words of acclamation and praise from your parents or something. Makes you walk a little taller around the house. I've got a couple of siblings, and so you're kind of in the good books, and you can kind of ask maybe the things you want, and you'll get it. You go to the parent-teacher meetings, I remember at school, and we only have good things to say. He's doing all right, We need more of him, in the class. You're like, yes, this is going. My parents are hearing this right now. How was Rebecca's? How was Lizzie's report? But yeah, it's all done in good fun, and it's just like that not sibling rivalry, but it's just the way it is in a sibling household. But in the context of the kind of words Jesus is giving here to them, there's just no comparison. It's so temporary, so insignificant. But to the churches in Revelation, it's just all out praise. And it must have been so heartening to hear these things, as a church, to hear Jesus directly praising them. It must have felt so good to hear it. Imagine if that's the way Jesus, could speak of our church. How heartened would you be about that? That would be amazing. And that's the way he does see us. That's the way he wants to see us. And we see him praising them in testing circumstances. And we'll talk a bit more about that, why it was testing. There was especially being in the Roman rule, that was around them, there was specific challenges in their time. We'll read about some of the imagery and some of the history going on here now. So we've got the two churches, Smyrna. I'll read a bit here. Smyrna was the larger of the two. It's actually modern day Izmir today. Izmir in Turkey. And an issue with all of the churches kind of at the time, but one of the big challenges in the time of Revelation was this imperial cult that was developed in the Roman Empire. It basically meant that at any point, kind of the emperor could suddenly call on his subjects to honor him, to pay homage, to proclaim him as their Lord. So, for any Christian who suddenly is faced with, having to proclaim someone else as Lord, there's an immediate challenge there. Immediate challenges with that, for obvious reasons, Christ being their Lord. The imperial cult kind of represented one of the greatest challenges to the disciples in the Roman Empire, as it literally proclaimed the emperor as a godlike figure, basically, that divine emperor cult. Emperors could demand the loyalty of their subjects, and sometimes those who refused to do that, as the Christians would be persecuted for that. They'd be looked down upon in society, and some even faced death for that. They faced trials, they faced that hour of trial when they went through these things. So that's what was going on at the time. This left the churches, and the Christians very, very vulnerable to persecution on a massive scale. And this is when the church is kind of sprouting out as well into the world. And it's very hard for me to imagine in my kind of UK 2018 mindset just what it must have been like to live in these times. We live a relatively peaceful kind of time in the UK, but back in these times it just wasn't the case. But the reality for the Christians was it was kind of state and faith were very much at odds with each other in these times. In terms of the imagery, we hear about a victor's crown. But what does Jesus mean? Is this like a World Cup crown, or some kind of, if you're interested in Wimbledon, a Wimbledon crown or something, or some kind of earthly thing? If you're a sports fan, today's a great day for you. We love to give people crowns and to award people things. As did the Romans, they had many things, where Olympics and such, where they would award. We've seen 32 odd nations, going after the crown, vying for the crown, and we're down to our final two. And we even have a crown. We have a monarchy. We have a monarchy over us as well. What kind of crown is Jesus talking about? You know, is Jesus talking about even a royal crown? Is he going to promise them some kind of prestige or status? Well, not so. You know, if you look a bit more into the history of Smyrna, you realize that actually the city hosted Olympic Games. You know, they actually hosted early Olympic Games, which is kind of written into the imagery. And so when he's talking about a victor's crown, there's actually a slightly different meaning. The Greek word for crown is Stephanos. Stephanos. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but you know how it is with the Greek. And that actually means a victory laurel wreath representing victory in athletic games. So something like that. You know, you've probably seen those kind of, you know, people when they've been given victory, they get a flowery kind of thing to wear. That's the kind of crown that he's talking about, you know. When we think of crown, we think of something on the head, but this is like a victory. You've finished the race in the athletic games. You know, you've done the marathon. You've finished. Jesus was promising not a literal kind of wreath, but you know, maybe a wreath in heaven. I don't know, but a final victory. You know, a promise that conquering Christianity wasn't defeating the empire. It wasn't defeating some kind of enemy or opponent. It was living a faithful life to the end, making it, finishing the race. You know, we hear a lot about Paul saying, I want to finish the race, or I finished the race. There's just so much connection between the athletics and you know, in a Christian race, there are ups and downs, just like in a normal race. Just like I don't know if you guys do marathons. I've taken up a bit of running since I've been in Glasgow, and nothing major. Try and do like 4 or 5K a week or something. But you know, you go through the different challenges. Like, you know, the times it's going well, you're going uphill, you just feel like quitting and stopping, or like, you know, and you can really feel it. I can feel like I can connect with these passages a bit more now than maybe I could. So we see that reference to a victory crown. We see this phrase, you know, to the Jews, like, you know, synagogue of Satan, and this isn't kind of an attack. This isn't an attack on the Jewish faith as such. What it really represents is how Jews at the time would often kind of denounce Christians to the Romans to kind of put them in trouble. You know, they would denounce them. Oh, you know, they're not proclaiming you as emperor, and that would get the Christians in trouble because the Jews they enjoyed kind of an exemption from that. The Romans recognized the Jews as a faith and this history, and so they were given like a degree of leniency with that. So yeah, and in Philadelphia we see the phrase, you know, about the one who is victorious, I'll make a pillar in the temple of my God. This follows kind of more knowledge that in AD 17, Philadelphia, that part of on the map which you saw back at the beginning, suffered a massive earthquake. The city was completely destroyed. Like, it was exempt from taxes afterwards because it was so badly destroyed. They wanted to rebuild the city. And this is God saying, I'm going to make you a pillar in the temple of my God. So there must be a magic, but everything has come down and crashing. But no, even the earthly pillars aren't going to compare to what you're going to be in my temple. It's amazing just how God, you know, uses what's happened in people's lives and reminds them, and he uses that to show them what it's going to be like in heaven. It's just absolutely amazing. So there's some of the history and imagery which is always accompanying things in Revelation, which is incredible. So let's go and have a look. What can we learn from this? What can we take away? I've got basically 2 points for you here. And the first key lesson 1 is to be imitators of their faith. Imitators of their faith. The churches in Philadelphia and Smyrna were, you know, they faced a very specific set of challenges. They faced the exact same challenges as the other churches at the time, but Jesus kind of points them out for being faithful to the end. They faced that split from Judaism. They faced the Roman Empire kind of actively pursuing them. They just had so much to contend with. But Jesus spoke to these churches just full of encouragement, full of praise, lifting them up for the way they stood up for Jesus, when it would have seemed so easy just to compromise here, there. Let's just gain our place in the Roman Empire so we don't have to worry, and then we can live our lives. But you know, Jesus is like, well done for just carrying on, even though you've faced such things. Even though you face that, you will have a final victory. I love what it says in chapter 3:12. It says, Jesus will write on them the name of my God and the city of my God, the New Jerusalem. And Jesus was reminding them, I think, that although they sacrificed their identity in the Roman Empire, Jesus would bring them into the kingdom of heaven. God doesn't forget his people. They may sacrifice their citizenship in one nation, but they've got their place in God's kingdom, which is incredible.
Amen.
God doesn't forget his people. He's always with them. And I think we're in the exact same position. We can be encouraged about that. We're in the exact same place today. You know, we can gain that exact same privilege. In Mark 8, 35, 37, a very well-known passage, you know, to deny yourself and to take up your cross, we're essentially being told to lay down our lives on earth and to pick up the greater reward of heaven, you know, which we can see also being demonstrated here. And there's such a big difference with the earthly kingdom and God's kingdom, you know. Even this week and in the news, you see how there's so much instability and issues with the kingdoms of earth, but in the kingdom of God, there's just peace, stability, tranquility. Nothing will get you down. Like, you don't have to worry about these things. It's just amazing. Like, you can be completely free of those things. You can live on earth, but live as though you're in God's kingdom. You know, and I think for me, one of the biggest challenges in becoming a Christian was this concept of just surrendering to my life on earth for my place in heaven. It's something I hadn't really considered in my life, you know, and knowing Christianity before, until I come across passages like Mark 8. I knew that it meant, I learned that it meant potentially facing rejection from friends that I had, and challenges when it came to living my life on earth. It's just, you know, you try and live as a Christian, you know there are just some things you can't do. There are going to be times you're going to have to make choices, make decisions that may separate you from other people, you know, or may take a different path, and you have to be okay with that. You have to embrace it. One of the obvious times, and you know, I'm sure others have experienced, is at uni, you know, at university. Yeah. There's all kinds of things going on at university, growing up, and moving out, going home, going to a new place, the parties, the crazy social scenes, relationships seem to change like that, you know, between people. You know, during lectures, you know, you'd hear about what was going on the night before, you know, just at the different settings. And as a Christian, as a growing Christian, I knew that I needed to reject that. I couldn't just compromise and go, well, it's fine. I can indulge in this and live my life. And to my shame, often I would do that. You know, I need to step up, and those are the times I have to be stronger. Yeah. You know, even today, even though I've graduated, I can remember times where sharing my faith, even on campus, was just like rejection. Like, no, we're not interested, or that's strange. What are you doing? You know, just live your life free of those things, or just do what we're doing. And it can be really, really challenging. Yeah. You know, those aren't easy. Yeah. Those aren't easy times. That's certainly not in my character to go against any kind of grain to win people's approval. And you definitely feel in the minority. You know, maybe you're in similar situations now. And those small compromises can have a big impact in faith, a big impact on faith. Yeah. But what I was extremely grateful for at that time was just the church, having the support around me. I'd have people that would meet with me weekly, would come to campus with me to share my faith and to talk about the insecurities I had. Just daily and weekly reminders at church and such, that whatever you do during the week, whatever you're doing in life, that may be against the kingdom of earth, you're gaining your place in the kingdom of God on a daily basis. You know, maybe you feel like you're in a similar situation right now in your faith, or I want to encourage you to persevere, to not give up. You know, we're constantly told to not lose heart, to never forsake what we know. You know, God has given us everything we need in this life to live our lives faithfully to the end. He's given us even a great body of, even a church, a great church in Glasgow, a great church in Edinburgh, just to be faithful, to be reminded, to take communion, to be reminded that, you know, you are loved, you are cared for. God sees everything that you do. Yeah. You know, the disciples here, they didn't revoke their love for Jesus to fit in or to gain things in society. They admirably stood up for their faith, and Jesus lifts them up for doing so. Amen. You know, when you consider your life as a Christian today, what do you think Jesus would say in your case? You know, if he was to witness the way in which you live your life today, would he praise you just like this for the way that you live? How can we change in the next week and live this life so that we can feel, you know, really just focus on God's kingdom, Amen. God's love, you know, and spread that to others, to let them know that there is another way to live life here. You know, the churches may have lacked a lot in the eyes of the world, you know, a lot. They weren't terribly rich people, there wasn't a lot maybe going for them, but in everything they knew they had God. Yeah. They were treated differently, they probably seemed weak, you know, and in their weakness people thought, well, what's the impact of these people going to be? Look 2,000 years later. Look at how they've stayed. Look at how the impact of the church has had an indelible mark on society today, and it can do for us as well. They're to connect even more deeply to the love Jesus had, and they had to just connect on such a deep level. That conquering Christianity wasn't a great victory over some kind of great enemy or opponent. It wasn't any of that. It wasn't the way the Roman Empire expanded itself and left its mark, which we do have, but is ruins, which is going away. The mark that the Christians would leave was that faithful endurance of a life in Christ, persevering through everything. And it's just amazing to be involved and to walk on that same journey as they did. We can have the same impact. They focused on gaining their spot in God's kingdom, not the kingdom of earth. And through everything, that same goal will help us to be faithful in every situation, whatever we face. You know, one thing that is clear here with the message of Jesus is just how much he cared for the way the church has stood up. You know, I don't know about you, but it'd be great to have, at the end of my life, perhaps, you know, Jesus saying something along those lines. He faced the trials, he had many of them, you know, he persevered to the end, and, you know, we're going to welcome him in. Wouldn't that just be amazing to have that kind of, you know, I don't know what you call it, that thing, you know, when you have like, obituary. I'm not trying to think about that now, but like, just to think that might be what God says is incredible. And so the second point, blessed in all circumstances. So you had imitators of the faith and blessed in all circumstances. And so, as I said, when it came to these churches, right here, Jesus also encourages them for the way they dealt with poverty, mourning, and persecution. You know, he says, I know your afflictions to the church of Smyrna and your poverty, yet you are rich. And he encourages those in Philadelphia, encourages them to endure patiently. I will keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come. There is going to be he says that, he's talking about how there will be those challenges coming along, the Roman Empire, all that will all come, but I'm with you. And he knows, knowing the devastation to the church in Philadelphia, we can probably assume they didn't have much. Whatever they had may have been destroyed in the earthquake. We can assume that the church, was perhaps poor, lacked material things, yet they endured even this hardship. And it reminds me of a passage actually in Matthew 5, 3-10, which I put up there, one I'm sure you're familiar with. It says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the kingdom of earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This obviously comes during the time of the Sermon on the Mount, and I've often kind of read the scripture but not fully understood it or been able to connect. I feel like, we live such privileged lives. In 2018, we don't really know. Well, personally, I don't really feel like I know poverty or like to really know be in want or in need as such, which is why I really need a connection with the poor and just to see that and to know that not everyone lives the privileged lives we have. But definitely reading about the churches in Smyrna and Philadelphia, we get the sense that this was kind of the state of the church, that they related to a lot of what Jesus said just here. Maybe Jesus said this knowing this would happen, knowing there would be occasions that people would just need to be faithful even though they didn't have a lot, necessarily going for them. But there was a lot going for them. Though we may not necessarily relate to their strife they had to contend with, the government sanctioned persecutions, the enemies in society, the poverty, we need to embrace, I believe, this idea of blessed and this definition of blessed, truly. I read up recently that the Greek word makarios, also known as the Beatitudes, which is often what this is called, can be translated as supremely blessed. The idea of blessed goes farther than possessions or security from things in life. It comes from God directly, that direct blessing God has given. It's even greater than perhaps than happiness, it's contentment, peace, and all those great things. Blessed here doesn't talk about power, control, wealth, status, or anything like that. It's a very different type of blessing Jesus has to offer. Jesus talks about people being meek, merciful, pure in heart, peacemakers, persecuted, those who thirst for righteousness. These will be the ones who are blessed. these are the ones. You know, how do you embrace, you know, this definition of blessed? Is this one that you readily read and have in your life and see? You know, or does it come, you know, do you look at the material things as the way in which you're blessed? I know I can so often see, bank balance is a bit low, am I really being blessed? Does God really know? Does God really see? What about the future? Where am I going to live? What's the job going to be like? Is this what blessing really means? To have things? Or is it just to be blessed to know that God sees and God cares and God wants to give me really the things inside that give you the peace and contentment, not the things on the outside?
Yeah.
You know, there might be different obstacles today that can lead to us kind of to forgetting what God is really doing and how He's really working for us. You know, there can be so many occasions that can get us down or discouraged. But one thing that really inspires me about the Glasgow church, and I'm sure, you know, you guys as well, you guys are very well connected, is just the way the church really unifies around everyone and the different situations. There are various challenges in the church, you know, all kinds, health challenges, jobs, all kinds. But they just pull together during the trials and obstacles. The body of the church is able to keep us focused,
Amen.
to help us during every situation. No matter, you know, it talks about the early church in Acts being one kind of together, giving to those who had need, meeting on a daily basis. That was Jesus' plan for the church. You know, and I'm sure this was much what we see here. Do you really see yourself as blessed in all situations? You know, how can we give thanks to God, as Dre was saying, just for all the things we have in our lives, in all circumstances? Do you readily have the things on your mind that God has already done? Do you have and people do kind of gratitude lists of like what God's already done? And is that filling up? Are you still there's still more to add to that? You know, I feel like it's really something I need to embrace. What are the promises? Do I just remember the promises God's already given me? I'm always wanting God to do more, but what about the promises He's already given me? And I know I can rely on and depend on.
Yeah.
You know, the churches here, they embraced the new life Jesus had given them. They didn't exchange their place in heaven for acceptance in the Roman kingdom. And it says that some of them even went to the point of death for it. Some of them actually faced that. They went to that. They finished the race in a sense. They finished that race. They went to the end. They weren't prepared to back down, to give up, because they knew what was right. They didn't have much in the material sense or in the eyes of those around them, but they had a richness towards God. You are rich. They are rich. They found strength in their relationship with God and strength in each other to endure the things that they couldn't control. You know, I'm reading, I don't know if you guys have read the book, Victory of Surrender.
Yeah.
I actually read some of that this morning, and it was all about how you just got to be prepared to give, you know, surrender in the world's eyes is like you've lost, or, you know, you failed. But in God's eyes, surrender is to give everything, control to Him. The things that are outside of your control, just let God deal with it. They couldn't control their situation or, you know, the challenges, but they could just give themselves. We know God's got a plan. And all of Revelation is really, if you go and study it out, you see God, it's all about God's plan. How God's going to, even through these things, He's going to work, how He's going to, you know, advance the kingdom, even though it might seem like there's too many challenges. If you're really interested, you can keep following the Glasgow Church site and keep listening to the lessons. It's really, really encouraging. There's so much to learn. But you know, in this instance, Jesus promises those who humble themselves that they will be blessed in all circumstances, and that is something the church in Smyrna in Philadelphia also seem to understand and connect with. You know, so in closing, you know, we return to this idea of being a conqueror. What does it mean to be a conqueror? It's very much being like blessed, according to the Sermon on the Mount. In the world's eyes, you know, it's all too easy to associate blessed and conquering with ones who hold the power, the prestige, the wealth, the influence, and live lives of ease, comfort, privilege. But what's Jesus' view? No, Jesus turns that, as always, upside down.
Yeah.
Conquering isn't defeating some enemy or some foe and overcoming someone and having a physical victory. It's the faithful enduring, not fighting back or compromising, to gain a position of power. It's being faithful to the end.
Yeah.
And blessedness, humbly accepting the hardships of life, of holiness, righteousness, as you strive for those things, for the greater rewards of heaven and the kingdom of heaven. Not being the envy of the world in gaining comforts of privilege and prestige. That's what it means to be blessed. To just humbly give God control, to surrender those things, and to allow that peace to come and transcend. You know, that peace that transcends all understanding. That can be ours. And so I hope you get, you know, that's just a brief look at those two churches, and there's so much in there, but there's such an encouraging picture of church to imitate that kind of faith, and we can have a final victory. We can be more than conquerors as well. So, amen. Thanks for listening.
Amen.